Good afternoon to our viewers in Switzerland and Europe, and hello to all those joining us from America. My name is Tatiana Gaspar, and it is a tremendous joy and privilege to welcome you in the name of the Latin American Chamber of Commerce in Switzerland to our latest webinar on the current Middle East situation and its strategic consequences. We are delighted and grateful to publish this webinar in partnership with the Swedish-Swiss Chamber of Commerce and the Swiss-American Chamber of Commerce, whose members are joining us online. Welcome, everyone. Today, we are turning our focus to a region where power play, strategy, and uncertainty intersect in ways that shape the global order, and where decisions made today carry far-reaching strategic consequences impacting energy, tourism, trade, human lives, and so much more. At the heart of the current progress of this war lie complex and evolving relationships between countries. Understanding them is not only about diplomacy, history, religion, or conflict, but about the broader architecture of a regional stability and global security. It's an honor for me to introduce our distinguished speaker, who some of you may remember from another LATCAM webinar a year ago, where we were able to appreciate his informed, in-depth analysis. A warm welcome, Ambassador Joseph Westphal. It's great to have you with us again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
This session will challenge us to think carefully about the strategic dynamics shaping the region. I'm delighted to introduce today's moderator, who will provide guidance and structure during this hour. Ramon Esteve, Honorary Chairman of LATCAM. Welcome, Ramon. It's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you.
I'm also thrilled to introduce the President of LATCAM, Linda Walker von Grafenried, who has known Professor Westphal for many years and who agreed to address a personal message in just a moment. A warm welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
Before we begin, let me mention to our first-time viewers that this webinar will be recorded and the recording later uploaded to our YouTube channel, LATCAM Switzerland. Around 2/3 into the session, we foresee to have a Q&A. Please write your questions in the Q&A section. And now, Linda, the virtual floor is yours.
Yes, hello from me to all of our colleagues and members from the different chambers. It is with great pleasure that we have Professor Dr. Joseph Westphal as our speaker today. Joe has been a dear friend since we met in La Paz, of all places, Bolivia, in 1990. Since then, Joe has had an amazing, and I must even say thrilling career, having worked with 5 different US presidents. One of his daughters lived in Zurich as her husband was working on liver transplants at the University of Zurich. Thus, Joe has a certain affinity to Switzerland. His webinar last year, A Nation Divided and a Global Reset, that Tatiana just mentioned, the political landscape under Trump 2.0, was our most successful ever. Thank you, dear Joe, for sharing your vast experience and knowledge with us today.
Thank you.
Now I turn over to Ramon.
Thank you, Tatiana. Ambassador Westphal, it's a pleasure to be able to discuss the state of affairs of this world again. We discussed about a year ago, and at the time we concluded that with a very optimistic note that whatever happened under Trump 2, the U.S. was very resilient and could survive all kinds of wrong policy decisions or, whatever happened in the U.S. sphere. We're now into the second year of Trump 2 with many challenges, and I guess the greatest one where you have a lot to contribute for our members is the situation in the Gulf. Even though we're the Latin American chamber, what's going on in the Gulf affects the world economy, affects all of us. So we would like to have your thoughts on how this is going to evolve. over the next few months, hopefully weeks, but it looks more like months at this stage. So, what do you think, Ambassador?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you to the chamber and to the two chambers that are joining us today. And Ramon, it's always good to be with you. Thank you. Let me say a few words on a sort of personal note here to sort of frame this from where I come from. Um, I was a college student during the war in Vietnam, and many of us at the universities could see that this war, as it began in the 60s, was not something that was going to end well. And I remember we were demonstrating against the war. We felt that the reasons for going into this war were unjustified. You may remember that President Johnson went to Congress not with a formal request for a declaration of war. What he did is he went to Congress with the the request to support for congressional support of him deploying more troops to the area because one of our ships had been attacked by the Vietnamese in the Gulf of Tonkin. It became known as the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. And on that basis, Congress gave him the power, not the power, excuse me, gave him resources and the authority in a way to conduct operations there. And that began this long protected war that eventually forced us out of the country, and it was a useless waste of 60,000 lives. You know, we have a history of this. President Polk, Polk, in the 1840s, back then in the mid to late 40s, the states of Texas, where you were born, Ramon, the state of
Yeah.
Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona and California were part of Mexico. We're Mexican territory. And he conducted a war with Mexico and it eventually negotiated and took all of that territory away from Mexico. And again, no real justification other than manifest destiny. We need to have this territory. We need to empower ourselves this way. And then you've got other wars, Iraq, of course, being the other example of something that was, again, um, uh, projected on the basis of weapons of mass destruction, which were not there. We invaded a sovereign country, we killed its leader, and then, essentially experienced a proxy war that eventually pushed us out of there. So here we go again. Here's another example of the U.S. Moving into a conflict that that is not necessarily essential at this time. There are probably other ways we could have fought this conflict, given the age of the leadership, situation that had been brought forth by Israel attacking Hamas and then attacking Hezbollah. So anyway, this war that we're in, if you could call it a war, and Trump has made a big point of saying, I'm not calling it a war, it's a conflict. Um, it is a war, and it's going to be a very complex situation and very difficult to get out of it, and very difficult to end it.
Mhm.
Now, part of what the difficulty of analyzing this, and I'm sure it's all of you listening to this and watching this conflict move forward, have a hard time, as we do here in the United States, figuring out exactly why we're there, what the reasons are. There have been so many reasons given: nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, oil, you name it, a whole bunch of reasons, and they change from day to day. And the architect of all this, the person where we get the messaging from, the person who's speaking on it, the person who is deliberating the policy associated with this conflict, is the President of the United States, not the Secretary of State, not the Secretary of Defense, not other leaders in the government, not the cabinet members. It is one person, the president, who, through his social media, every night puts out messages, often contradicting the messages from the night before. So it's really difficult to tell where we're headed with this and how far this war will continue.
And do you see it extend? I mean, I think I read somewhere that the Houthis are now becoming involved. The Iranians have enabled them, so they could shut off the Red Sea. It is major. I mean, I don't see how the administration can backtrack at this point. Do you think the other Gulf monarchies may be involved because it is hindering their economies?
Well, on the point of the Houthis, they are severely weakened, and Iran is in no has no capacity now to help them the way they were helping them in the past,
Mm-hmm.
with rockets and drones and missiles and things of that nature. So I think whatever they're going to do, it's going to be very limited. The Saudis are using the Red Sea now to move oil out of Saudi Arabia uh, for exporting purposes, for example, to China.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, there's a significant amount of commerce that goes up the Red Sea through the Suez Canal, so to Europe and other places. So that will probably be okay. I think that will be sustained. We have some elements there that will keep that open. It's also in
Mm-hmm.
China's interest, and even to some extent Russia's interest, because China has now a big military outpost and base there and port on the African side on the Red Sea. And I'm sure they don't want
Mm-hmm.
to see that shut down. So they'll probably
Yeah.
also be a
Yeah.
factor in this. But the impact on the Arabian Gulf is significant because it's affecting supply chains, it's affecting commerce, of course, across the way, and it's affecting countries like China who can't get that Iranian oil that they were buying in Saudi oil as well. So
Mm-hmm.
so economically, this is having an impact, and it's going to have an impact on the whole world, as you said, Ramon, because even Latin America is going to experience, higher fuel prices, higher costs for commodities. It's going to have an impact everywhere. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but how do you define an end to this? I mean, what is the end? The president speaks one day about, you know, we probably have somewhere around 60,000 American troops in the Gulf area in the Middle East. We have
Wow.
a big naval base, we have a big army base and a big air force base there in
Mm-hmm.
Kuwait, in Qatar, and in Bahrain. And then he has sent now an additional 10,000 troops of the 82nd Airborne there. So we've got a significant number of troops, but Iran is not Iraq. Iran is a country of almost 90 million people. The IRGC is a pretty significant force. Um, it is not the kind of place where and what the elements that we sent into Iraq during our invasion of Iraq were 50 times greater than what we have placed now right now there in the Middle East.
Uh,
So from my experience as being a former Secretary of the Army and having been undersecretary doing those two wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, I see no way that we can have an invasion of Iran with the limited number of troops that we have there, despite our big naval presence and all of that. So whatever conflict we're going to continue to and effects we're going to continue to have, I think are going to be through air power and naval power, which is um, you know dropping lots of bombs and destroying a lot of their assets.
And occupying Karg Island, do you see that as an option for them? Would the U.S. gain anything from that?
Well, that the purpose of that would be to just basically shut off any potential oil exportation by them, shut down their oil industry, which is their one big significant source of income. So yeah, it would have an impact. But Karg Island, I was thinking of when the U.S. began its invasion of Japan during World War II, and its initial invasion of oh my God, I can't think of the island.
Okinawa or one of those?
Okinawa, yeah, Okinawa. Yeah. So Okinawa, was defended by the Japanese pretty aggressively, and it just cost us a lot of lives, and it was a very difficult operation. And to me, this is the same thing. I'm sure they've got it mined to the hilt. They've got all kinds of situations there that could cause lots of problems for our people. So I don't know how that happens. You can as he's threatened to just bomb it, just destroy it, by dropping bombs on it. So that he can do.
That he's got the hardware to do it.
That he can do.
Yeah. But do you see this as a competition for oil dominance with China? I mean, he took over Venezuela, or he thinks he did.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. The the two biggest sources of oil for China, of course, are Saudi Arabia and
Iran.
Iran.
Yeah.
And Saudi can make up that oil that they're losing from Iran, and whatever they were getting from Venezuela was probably pretty limited anyway.
Yeah,
the Chinese. So I don't think that's a factor. He's now going to be going to China, so I think he's going to want to have a more friendly dialogue with the Chinese leadership, but the future going forward. So I don't think that that's a big factor. The Russia piece, we know he's very friendly with Putin for some reason that is unexplained to me. And Putin has been very quiet on this conflict. He has said very little, even though they have an agreement to support Iran, not militarily, but to support them in all kinds of ways. So it's possible that Putin will support Iran by providing perhaps some intelligence, perhaps some drone capability, although they were depending on Iranian drones for the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So Trump's, the most difficult thing that we're going to talk about here is trying to define where Trump is on this, what his policy goals are, what his objectives are, what his strategy is, because it's all over the place. And there's no one else that gives us any hints to that, because there's no other spokespeople that are deliberating on the policy of this conflict.
Yeah, I mean, what does done look like for President Trump? It's I don't think he knows himself.
I think what done this. I'm totally speculating on this, and again, because there's so many mixed messages, it's hard for anyone, even the most scholarly of people or the most engaged of people, to figure out exactly the answer to that question. But I would say today that done to me is that he's going to find some reason to say, we are negotiating, we're going to cease conflict, we're going to ensure that they do not, resume their nuclear program, and he's going to eventually just basically walk away. In other words,
the irony would be that he signs something like the Obama nuclear agreement that Kerry negotiated, I guess.
Right. He basically walked away from that because he said he thought the sanctions would give Iran too much leverage, relieving some of the sanctions, which was part of the agreement. He didn't think that the Iranians would actually follow through on what they promised to do in that. Um, he just felt there was a very weak piece, and maybe he was right. I don't know. It's very possible that some of the things he said were probably, maybe potentially true. But in any case, it would have probably limited their ability to continue to build nuclear weapons, given
Hmm.
that treaty.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so then they just went full force. Um, so I think, he could say that we've completely through the bombing campaign and what the Israelis have done, we have very limited their ability to move forward on a nuclear program. So that's one thing he could say. We've achieved that.
Yeah,
They've,
yeah.
they've pretty much destroyed a lot of the ballistic missile capability of Iran. But the other
Mhm.
thing that he's talked about, regime change, that's not happened, and that's very unlikely to happen. The IRGC is very firmly entrenched. They're very powerful. They're very uh, aggressive, and they're not going to let up on the way they view us and the way they view Israel. So, and now they've got another enemy, which is the Gulf countries, which they feel have been supporting the United States in this conflict, and
Hmm.
you know, so the tensions there will continue across the
Yeah.
board.
But you wouldn't anticipate any kind of civilian upheaval. They've repressed that so hard, even before the war, that that's probably not happening, don't you think? Or
Yeah, I think there could be a process long term where some of the
Mhm.
more moderate elements, both of the IRGC and of the government and leaders there, could eventually make some headway but I don't think you're going to see a wholesale change.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, the leadership is pretty entrenched, and they're going to protect that leadership now because they're very vulnerable. The
Yeah.
other question is, what is Israel going to do? How far more is Israel going to go on the Iran piece? I mean, I think they're focusing right now a lot on Lebanon and ensuring that they've got territory between them and whatever dangerous elements there are in that part of the world secure. So they're really, you know, but they still intend on continuing to hit Iran as long as Iran continues to hit them. So
But don't you think Israel is a little bit overstretching itself because it hasn't solved Gaza yet? Apparently, according to the New York Times, Hamas is back and collecting taxes from the local populations.
right,
Uh,
right.
and they're in Lebanon and they're still bombing Iran. And I don't know how
That's
they
right. I
do
mean,
it.
I
I
think
mean,
that's right. And their Iron Dome and our ability to support that as well is getting more and more limited.
hmm, hmm.
Just simply by, you just can't produce the weapons as fast as they're using them.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then we're still selling weapons through European countries to Ukraine,
yeah.
and that's vital. I think Americans, for the most part, in polls that I have seen, Americans continue to strongly support our help to Ukraine and don't see this as a higher priority at all.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah,
Um, and so if we fail to provide that support to the Ukrainians, then I think we're, politically, the administration is going to be in some hot water there.
yeah, yeah.
But Trump is very resilient, and
He
his
is.
support
He is.
doesn't wane. There was
Hmm.
a news feature on TV. I think it was last night that I saw it. They were interviewing these farmers in Georgia who farm. Georgia produces a lot of peaches. It's
Hmm.
called a peach state, and these farmers who are having to spend a great deal more money on fertilizer and fuel, you know, as the crop is getting ready to come out, and it's very important crop. So they interviewed a bunch of them, and they were all um, they were all Republicans who supported Donald Trump, voted for him in the election. So the reporter was asking them, different ones, uh, how do they feel about this war and will they continue to support the president given the price of fuel, the inflation that's going on, all these issues. And they were all, yes, we think this was the right thing to do. We needed to do this. Iran is a threat to us. And they use those words. Iran is a threat to us. So I think he certainly has made his case with his base, and they still support him
Yeah, yeah.
strongly. You know.
Mhm. Mhm. Let me move on to another question, which is sort of a corollary of what's going on. At the World Economic Forum this year, Mark Carney delivered a speech declaring the end of the old rules-based international order, a real rupture, not a transition, and outlining a new strategic doctrine for the medium-sized powers in a world of intensifying great power rivalry. He argued that we are now using economic integration as weapons, tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, and supply chain vulnerabilities to be exploited. I think he's right on, and I don't think it's very different from what's happening in the US. The rules based order seems to be something a bit of the past. What do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you had a president coming after Trump, let's say a Democrat or even Republican, but somebody who felt we needed to restore that world order that we saw come out of World War II and so on. If Joe Biden came back to life to run the country again, I don't think that would be sustainable with the way things are
Hmm.
going around the world. So it's not just
Really?
us. I think the world has
Yeah.
changed. I
Hmm.
think countries want more flexibility. They want to. I think the WTO will continue, but it will continue in the way it's working right now. When countries see a benefit from it, they'll use it. When they don't, they won't.
Yeah.
I think there will be many more exceptions and loopholes to the way it operates. I think there'll be selective enforcement depending on the situation. So I think Carney was right. I think it's over for now. How it will be replaced, I'm not smart enough to know that. You probably know better than I do how might that evolve over time.
I have no idea. It's anyone's guess, really. Uh,
I don't think it's going to collapse. The framework that countries follow today, they'll do it when it suits them, and when it
mhm.
doesn't, they won't. And
Well, I think some big trade groups like the EU will continue.
yes,
I think what
yes,
happened to the UK with Brexit is a cautionary tale. They're
right,
definitely much worse off out than in,
right,
and they may be coming back. Um, but the WTO is a much bigger animal there, and
right.
without the U.S. appointing its share of the judges, it's powerless right now. Um, it's
Yeah, I agree.
yeah. We have a little bit of time left. If we can maybe switch to the U.S. domestic situation. What do you think of midterms? Because from what you read, it seems like, and you mentioned it, Trump retains his hardcore base, but you do have higher prices, you do have high interest rates, you do have inflation. What's going to happen there?
Yeah. Well, there's two things that are happening. One is that there's a very significant number of members of Congress, particularly in the House, that are retiring, that have just
Hmm.
decided they don't want to do this job anymore. And they're being replaced by, or people who are running or are going to be running in their stead, along with other Democrats and Republicans, will be independents.
Hmm.
So
Oh.
what you're going to see is a Congress with I think, with a much more significant number, particularly in the House, of independents coming in
Hmm.
who can then align themselves. Traditionally, they have aligned with the Democrats, but who can align themselves with either party depending upon the votes and the issues that they're facing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you're not going to have the cohesion that you had before, and that will not be helpful to the president because his Republican base will be smaller, and it'll be
Hmm.
replaced by a mixture of independents and Democrats that will probably oppose some of the things that are going on as part of the administration's policies. For example, the budget he's going to submit to Congress here in the next few weeks is supposed to be the highest budget ever, with trillions of dollars being spent on defense. And I think people are going to question whether that's really where we need to put our money, given what else is going on in the country, in the
Hmm.
areas of education, environment, you name it.
Hmm.
So I think the Republicans will lose the House of Representatives, not by a big margin, by a small margin. So it'll still be a very divided base. I think the Senate probably will stay Republican, again, by very small numbers. So you'll have a very divided government, with a president who will have lost some of his influence in Congress. But is the Congress able to really check him? As you know, in our system, one of the things that's been very important is this checks and balances. And,
Yeah, which
we
hasn't
have
worked.
presidents, FDR, for example, everybody,
Mm.
loves Franklin Roosevelt, who saved the country from the Depression and, took us and to victory in World War II. Um, FDR violated the Constitution a ton of times
Yeah,
trying to
yeah, yeah,
find a New
yeah, yeah,
Deal.
for sure. Yeah.
And the Supreme Court kept telling them, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. And the good part of that was that the president, FDR, uh, said, okay, I can't do it, I won't do it. In other words, he obeyed the rulings of the court.
Hmm.
Uh, Bill Clinton, I worked for Bill Clinton, and we had issues where he did the same thing on federal spending. We just did, and Richard Nixon too decided not to spend monies that Congress had appropriated. People sued, states sued, different entities sued the president. Went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said you have to obey the rules of the Congress and spend the
Hmm.
money as designed by Congress, and they did. They accepted the rulings of the court. Now you have President Trump, who may and could decide, I'm not going to listen to the Supreme Court. Since I'm
Yeah.
the enforcer, the president is the one who enforces the law. He may decide, I'm not going to enforce this law on myself.
Hmm.
What happens? Then you have a constitutional crisis, in which case Congress would have to jump in and, by law, do something with the president, impeach him, force him to, by law, to do certain things that, again, relies on his willingness to support the tenets of the Constitution.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we could end up with a very divided Congress and a court that is also somewhat divided, trying to make policy with a president who doesn't think he needs to listen to either one of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's concerning.
Congress certainly has not exercised this supervisory authority over what's going on. I'm surprised they didn't go up in arms a little bit more over the attacks on Iran. I mean, Trump is playing the Putin playbook, calling it a special military operation, but like you said, it is a war, full
Right.
blown. And Congress really has done very, very little to say anything about it. He has this sway over primary elections. Do you think he'll maintain that going into
No,
the
no,
midterms?
no, I think you're seeing a lot. The last few elections that have taken place have been won by Democrats. So
Oh,
I
I
think
know.
I
And
think you see a
anybody he
rupture there.
supported lost, which is
Right,
a little bit encouraging, but they're still
right,
far from a majority in Congress.
yeah. But I
Mm.
think that I think he still retains a certain amount of strong support, not only from the Republican base, but also people are conflicted on some certain issues Um, if they hadn't if Homeland Security and ICE in particular hadn't had such a heavy hand in their operations in various states across the country, the immigration or the migration issue could have been resolved more to Trump's perspective than it has. But when they killed two people in the streets of
Yeah,
Minneapolis,
Minneapolis, yeah.
and yeah,
Well, and he has to showcase all of that. I mean, Obama, I think, deported like 3 million people, and nobody really even knew about it. And
it was the way it was done. It was
yeah, it
done,
was done properly. I mean, it was done
right,
quietly and with due
right,
process, I guess. So,
right.
but when you want to showcase it, showing yourself in Alligator Alcatraz is what a brilliant idea that was. Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of his fellow citizens upset.
Right.
So,
And again, his base remains supportive, even though those immigration issues and arresting all these people and going after all these non-violent immigrants who are basically just working in farms and working in factories, and I mean, we got these large meat packing plants in places like Iowa and
yeah.
Nebraska. We've got these huge farms, vegetable farms, fruit farms. You know, our generation of kids, are not going to work in those places.
Yeah.
We need that immigrant labor that'll come in. And that immigrant labor is coming in because they hope that by them working, making a little bit of money and being able to support their families, their kids will get out of that the business and get an education and make better for their lives.
Hmm.
So it's a good process. And we had a system years ago under Bush that worked. And then all of a sudden Congress just didn't restore it. And
Hmm.
and we couldn't get anything done through Congress, and so it went to hell. And so but yet all those people who depend on that immigrant labor are still supporting the president's
Yeah.
efforts on immigration. So,
Well, I think that's what pleases his base the most is the immigration issue because I don't think well, on the other issues he's failed. I mean, gas is not down, food prices are not down.
right,
Mm.
right, no,
I,
no, and they're going up. I mean, right, they were
hmm.
just reporting this morning that home mortgages are now increasing again. They were coming down a
Hmm.
little bit. You mentioned gas prices, of course, and grocery prices. So everything's going up. The cost of insurance, cost of travel because of fuel.
Yeah.
So, um,
I have Tatiana sending me a message saying we have a little bit used up our time and that she has a few questions from the audience. So,
okay.
Tatiana, why don't you go ahead?
Actually, I wanted to give Linda the priority. She has a question. I know she gave it to me before. So, Linda, could you unmute yourself? Great.
Yes, thank you, Tatiana, and thank you, Joe. That's and Ramon. It's a very, very inspiring session. You were in Saudi Arabia as the ambassador, so you have a lot of experience in that region. How do you see the Saudis right now? I mean, I don't know whether it's true, but I read, I don't remember exactly where, that the Saudis have actually come out and said that they don't want the war to stop. Is this true? And if it's true, I mean, how long do you think, what is the strategy not only of the Saudis, but also of the other Arabs in the region? How do you, what is their long-term goal?
Well, I think you have to sort of separate Saudi Arabia from the other Gulf states because generally speaking, the Gulf states, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, even Kuwait, but especially those other three, historically have always, under the table, behind everybody's back, have traded with Iran. They have, there's a lot of commerce that goes back and forth, and there's relationships there, even though there were sanctions and so on against Iran. So So I'm sure they're not happy that this is going on because and Oman is the other country I've failed to mention. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia did not have that relationship. Saudi Arabia's relationship with Iran has been very difficult over time. When I was there, for example, um, the uh, the Saudi embassy was set on fire
Mm.
because there had been a crane that had fallen in the Holy Mosque at Mecca and killed a group of pilgrims. The large number of them, I think there were almost 1,000 of them, were Iranians. And the Iranians somehow thought that this was maybe intentional, whatever, and a group of demonstrators attacked the embassy, Saudi embassy, burnt it, and Saudi embassy broke relations with Iran. They've recently restored those relationships, but it's a very unsettled kind of relationship. There's no love lost there, and I can't say for sure, but the news media has reported that Mohammed bin Salman has urged President Trump, to continue the war, the conflict, whatever you want to call it. I call it a war. To me, it's a war
Yeah.
um, with Iran, and don't let up. The idea that we need to bring that regime down. That's not going to happen so easy. You know, so. Uh,
But the Saudis will also suffer. I mean, if this continues like this, are they willing, if they want this war to go on, I mean, are they willing to take the consequences?
Well, I don't know that there are some significant consequences. There may be some, drone and missile attacks that might hit parts of Riyadh or some parts of Saudi Arabia. They hit a recent military base there. But that's not something that's going to, really hurt Saudi Arabia significantly. And Saudi Arabia has ways to get their commerce going, as I mentioned earlier, through the Red Sea. Um, and they have the resources to withstand this. You know, Prince Mohammed was, when I was there as ambassador, we talked a lot about the treaty, the JCPOA that we were working with the Iranians at the time. And there was a lot of news that he was opposed to that treaty. And he said to me very clearly, he says, I'm not opposed to the treaty. I think actually a treaty would be a good thing. I don't want the Iranians to have nuclear weapons. Not because I think they're going to launch a bomb against Saudi Arabia. I'm afraid that if they have nuclear facilities there and they have an accident, a Chernobyl type of accident,
Yeah.
that whole stuff will come right across the sea onto us. So I want to prevent them from doing that. So I think he'd like to see the end of that opportunity, that the Iranians could bring back their nuclear capability. He'd like to see the end of that. But I don't think sustained conflict for him is the idea. I think and also, the Saudis were attacked by Iran. I forget the year. It was in Trump's first term, where they attacked Aramco and destroyed a number of Aramco
Mhm.
facilities. And they did those out of a base in Basra, near Basra. Basra is in Iraq, but there's a base on the Iranian side where they launched those rockets and drones to attack Aramco. And neither Saudi Arabia nor the United States did anything about it. Saudi Arabia has a pretty potent air force. They could have launched their F-15s and bombed that base. They didn't do it. So I think this may be a nice situation for them, that to have the U.S. do this so that they don't have to do it.
So maybe we could now take the question of the viewers. I have one here. What will it take to reopen the Strait of Hormuz?
Oof.
I think it won't be bombings and it won't be force. I think it will be the Iranians yielding and allowing more and more traffic to go through. I don't think we have the capability necessarily to completely eliminate the Iranians' ability to affect traffic. We can limit their ability to affect traffic, and that will see some movement go through. So I think eventually it'll be some resolution, and this is, I think, what the president's looking for, because he's feeling the pinch here from voters that are upset about having to pay now $4 a gas. I know for you in Europe, that's like nothing. $4 a gallon. Yeah, that you'd love to have that opportunity, but
Yeah.
for us, that's a big change, especially since we were gas prices were going down and they've increased now almost double. And then if you live in California, forget it, they're even twice that price.
Mhm.
So I think the president wants to ease that pressure, and he's desperate to find a solution to the straits. And I think they will find it through some negotiated agreement with the Iranians. The Iranians will yield on some of this, I think. They need to get their oil out too.
Yeah.
Next question. Let me see if I can synthesize that. According to your opinion, is the present situation with wars in Iran and Lebanon perhaps also creating new opportunities for economy, industrial development, and resolution of social problems? And what might those opportunities be?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Are we talking about opportunities in Iran or in the region or?
I don't know, maybe in Iran and Lebanon, probably once the war is over. That's how I interpret the question.
There'll be
Well,
a lot of
Iran,
rebuilding.
yeah, Iran is going to need some support from some of its partners. So, what partners are we talking about? We're talking about basically Russia and China. And Russia is in no position to provide a lot of assistance to Iran, given what it's been doing in Ukraine and the tremendous expenditure of lives and money that they're using there. So I don't think they're going to be in a great state to be able to support Iran's rebuilding of Iran or Iran's infrastructure or its domestic economy. China is in a better position to do that, but they're going to want more control over that. The Chinese aren't going to just float money in there. So I think I don't see a lot of opportunity for that. Um, Lebanon is going to be in terrible shape. I think it's going to. I fear. And we haven't talked about Israel. I mean, Israel. The difference, I think, the way I see it, is Israel has a very definitive, very clear, very precise, very long-term goal here. Um, there's no wishy-washiness about where they are. It's not like us where you can't predict what the United States is going to do tomorrow. You just have to listen to whatever President Trump puts out at night. Not with Israel. We know exactly where, what their goals and intents, and it's not over for them. Um, they're not done with Iran, and they're certainly not done with southern Lebanon. So. And then Ramon mentioned Hamas. I don't know exactly what's going on with Hamas at this point in time, but they've still got that problem. So, and they got the problems with the West Bank. So they've got a lot of issues to deal with. And economically, it's affecting them as well. So, but I think Israel will continue. They almost have to. They can't just all of a sudden just withdraw. I mean, I don't think they will do that.
Mhm.
Thank you. Now, the next question. How is the current escalation in the Middle East reshaping global geopolitical alignments, particularly among major powers seeking to redefine their strategic influence in the region?
Yeah, I think so. If we take, for example, Europe, my view is that Europe is actually in a good place. I think the European countries, are going to be affected by this economically, of course, but I think they're in a good place because they haven't been engaged in this conflict. Not they haven't even Trump has asked for all kinds of military support, and he wants ships in the Gulf, and he wants more support from the European powers. They have remained somewhat aloof about this war, and I think is also hopefully going to mean that there'll be less acts of terrorism, you know, rearing their ugly head in European capitals. And, I think the Europeans will have obviously the same economic challenges that the whole world is going to have. I think that the relationship with the United States is going to be restored, but it'll be long term in the future, not immediately. I think that relationship is fractured right now, in my view. Latin America, while it's experiencing, I think, a lot of challenges economically because of these, because certain countries are oil dependent, and other countries are commerce dependent, and they're selling stuff to countries in the Middle East as well. They're going to be affected somewhat, but I think they're in a more resilient way, and you're seeing these new elections taking place and new leadership taking place that's more pragmatic and less ideological. So I think some Latin American countries are going to do much better as well. I think Venezuela there'll be a restoration of some of its oil capability. I think the United States, of course, under this administration, wants to exploit mineral and oil resources there, for our benefit, not so much for Venezuela's benefit. But I think in the long term, it will help Venezuela to restore that and bring some American oil companies back to restore their capability. So Venezuela will probably do better. Now we have to wait to see what happens with Cuba. That's another matter. He's allowed the ship from Russia to come and bring oil to Cuba, but now, we have an interesting situation, Ramon, that we haven't talked about, which is that, we've got the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and we've got the Secretary of State, and both of them are going to be candidates, probable Republican candidates for the presidency.
To replace Trump, yeah.
Right. And the Secretary of State, as you know, is Cuban-born American. And he has taken a very interesting view of all the situation, and he is certainly approaching this from the standpoint that he's going to be a candidate for the presidency, not just as an appointee of Donald Trump. So I think for Venezuela and for Latin America, he will have a more orderly, creative way of addressing whatever issues we have with those countries while he's in that position. So I see that as a positive, actually, in a way.
Yeah.
To have someone like him in that for Latin America's purposes. And then Africa and Asia, of course, Asia is so impacted by whatever China does. And China is looking at the situation, looking at Taiwan. I don't see China invading Taiwan, but at least not in the near term. I don't see that happening. And then Trump is expected to go there and have a visit with them. So who knows what that'll come from. So I think the Asian countries are trying to align themselves. We had a pretty good alignment when Biden was president with the Asian countries, particularly Japan, Australia, South Korea, and so on, for mutual defense and Taiwan. But that's been kind of not supported by Trump very much. So they're more independent now. So anyway.
Next question. What are the most immediate risks that international businesses and supply chains should anticipate as the conflict expands its regional and global impact?
I don't think I think the challenges are how do I put this? That's probably the toughest question you could ask, during this conflict, because right now, of course, supply chains are being affected, and I think there are going to be long-term structural shifts in those supply chains. So depending upon what industry we're talking about and where these dependencies are, it's going to affect different entities different. I think there's going to be more diversification in the Middle East, a lot more to come. Um, uh, there'll be more investment in renewables, particularly in the Middle East. There'll be more probably efforts to create more domestic production in different countries. So countries like, African countries and Latin American countries are going to have to decide that they're going to need to produce more materials domestically rather than rely on in more long, long, not long, what do I say, international supply chain that are more difficult to maintain. So I think that the structure is going to change, but I think supply chain resilience will take over, and I think it won't be as terrible a problem as people think. This conflict is not
Mhm.
going to last very long.
We hope not. One thing that scares us as agricultural commodity traders is fertilizers not getting out and pushing
Right,
prices up.
right.
So that obviously impacts cost of food and availability of food into the coming year. That's kind of scary, but we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big issue. That's a big issue. Now, I don't know enough about that industry, whether, there are other places around the world where that can make up some of the supply shortages of
Hmm.
fertilizers, for example. But, for example, let me ask you a question, Ramon. Europe depends a good deal on um, liquefied natural gas that it gets from Qatar. That's obviously not moving. So what happens to
Oh,
that
I didn't hear
need?
you.
Oh, I said that Europe depends a lot on liquefied natural gas that comes out of Qatar, that's shipped
Yes,
from Qatar.
and they're
That's
getting
obviously
some from
shut
the
down for
US
them.
right now.
Yeah, is that so? I didn't know what the impact to European
Well,
energy
gas is
prices.
way up here in Switzerland anyway. I'm sure that it's the same for the rest of Europe. So,
Yeah,
but Europe was lucky going into this because all the tanks were full when the war started. But there's not that much storage for fossil fuels here. They may last until June, and then you have the summer. But how do you refill them before the next winter? That's
right,
what I
right.
see as a challenge.
What I don't see changing is Iran is not going to change very quickly.
No, I don't think
Iran is
so.
going to remain in the hold of this very conservative, very powerful, and very dominant force led by the IRGC and its leadership. Even though we've decimated some of the leadership of both the IRGC and the government, um, there'll always be people to replace them, and there will always be hardliners that will continue. And I don't think they're going to yield. And I think um, they'll be just as ruthless with demonstrators and people who want to change the government in in
Hmm.
in demonstrations on the streets. So I think we can get used to an Iran that's going to still be very, very anti-West, anti-US, anti-Israel, maybe not as capable to do damage because they can't support their proxies the same way they used to, but they'll still be a force to be reckoned with.
1 hour has almost gone by. I don't know, Joe, do you have time for one more question before we
Sure,
close?
sure.
To what extent do you foresee the current crisis accelerating long-term structural changes in the Middle East, especially regarding energy security, regional alliances, and the role of non-state actors?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question, and I've been thinking a lot about this. When I was ambassador, or before that, when I was secretary, army, we were trying to get the Gulf countries to work more as a kind of a NATO force in the region for security purposes, not only for their own security, but for world security, to protect again the tremendous amount of commercial traffic that exists in that region and commercial opportunities that were abounding. That never happened. They could not agree with each other on how to sustain a Gulf Coordinating Council is what it was called. I think that may change now. I think maybe those lessons will have been learned. I mean, there's a lot of competition between these countries, between the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The old tribal nature of these people over time, over history, while it has changed dramatically, sometimes still continues, and so there's still a lot of uh, competition there. But they all see the need to work together. They're all very, very progressive in many ways. I mean, Saudi Arabia it's amazing the changes that have transpired there. Amazing.
Mhm.
And I think that they will probably need to work closer together um, to strengthen their economic opportunity as well as their regional influence, particularly with a weakened Iran, where they can have greater autonomy from the conflict with Iran and move forward. And I think you saw that happening already a little bit with the Abraham Accords with Israel, with a couple of countries doing that. And now, in the future, I see that happening again. I think you will see a relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel in the future. There's no question in my mind that that's going to happen.
Thank you very much, Joe. Ramon, would you like to briefly conclude before I close the webinar?
I don't know how to conclude except to thank Joe. I mean, I think we will all leave this session with a lot of open questions and hoping for the best. And we will watch Mr. Trump's Truth Social postings to have an inkling of what may happen. But that's about it, Joe. I don't know how to conclude this meeting. I mean, it's great information you gave us. I really enjoyed this. But there's certainly no clarity in world affairs today. I mean, it can go any way. It's my view of the world.
Well, as one of the questions you posed is, the world order that we had before that we could somewhat rely on
Mm-hmm.
in terms of working together and arriving at some decisions about how we dealt with things was helpful. Now, there were
Yeah,
times when that wasn't so helpful. For example, when we went, reluctantly attacked Libya,
yeah,
and that kind of, went south. I mean, there was an example of not a very well coordinated. I happened to be in London at the time, meeting with the military leadership in London when that transpired, and it was very confusing what was going on. So, but even in those times, we could come to terms with how to do things, in the aftermath. Now that's gone, pretty much
yeah.
gone. The
Mm-hmm.
U.S. is playing it alone,
Yeah.
and attacking. I wish we wouldn't do this. Attacking countries that have been our partners for the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's sad. That's all I can say, Tatiana, as
Yeah.
a conclusion.
Yeah, unfortunately, peace is nowhere near, and the whole situation is sad. What is less sad is what a terrific webinar we've had this past hour. Thank you very much, Professor Westphal, dear Joe, for providing tremendous added value by helping us navigate a complex geopolitical situation with clarity, depth, and nuance. Many
You're
thanks,
very kind. You're
Ramon.
very kind. I think I did the opposite. Just
No, 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 no. Maybe the whole situation is not very clear, but
We
your
have a better understanding of it for
was
sure.
definitely uh, you bred much clarity in it. Thank you so much. Many thanks, Ramon, for agreeing to be the moderator, examining a variety of facts and preparing.
Anytime. This is very interesting. So just call me.
You prepared this highly substantive session with thoughtful engagement. That was great. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for the additional personalized touch. and for always making LATCAM profit of your excellent relations, such as Professor Westphal. Finally, we greatly appreciate the partnership with Johan Bjarneman and his team at the Swedish-Swiss Chamber of Commerce and Raul Sagal and his team at the Swiss-American Chamber of Commerce, who supported the idea of this webinar wholeheartedly. Dear viewers, we hope to have provided you with a meaningful perspective on this issue of global impact and gravity. Thank you all for connecting. You will receive a Zoom inquiry tomorrow where you can share any comments that may still come to mind. I will be happy to forward them to our speaker. The recording of the webinar will be on our YouTube channel, LATCAM Switzerland, very shortly. Feel free to recommend it to friends who were not able to attend today. Thank you all for your interest. I look forward to seeing you again on the next occasion. Till then, all the best. Be safe, happy Easter, and goodbye.
Yeah, happy Easter to you too,
Thank you.
Tatiana. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tatiana.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you, Linda.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Joe.
Thank you, Ramon.